Much has been discussed about the power of social media, news media, and online influence, whether it's elections, medicine, entertainment, or a whole host of other subjects. And AARP, like many other organizations, has offered programs to help consumers better understand how to safely navigate these challenging waters. And we hear in these programs from the audience why it can be so frightening and often frustrating to be online, on social media, even to answer a text on your phone. And we ask ourselves, is this real? Hence the title for today's program. But news, online, social media can also be a platform for legitimate purposes, for education, emergency alerts, business, sharing of ideas, connection with family and friends, and potentially meeting new ones. Today's program seeks to delve a little bit deeper into how to manage this complicated world and to meet two amazing people from different organizations who are trying to address the problem by empowering consumers to see a bigger, fuller picture, to ask more questions, and to learn how to verify, and in some cases, when to walk away. Our intent in this program is to help everyone understand what resources are available to help you become a savvy consumer of media, and that you leave feeling a little bit of a healthy dose of skepticism, but not cynicism. So, joining us from the East Bay is and moderating today's conversation is Ryan Kawamoto. Ryan is the Regional Program Manager for Older Adults Technology Services from AARP, where he empowers older adults through technology at Senior Planet from AARP, which is housed at Avenidas in Palo Alto, California. He is the former executive director of UI Kai, Japanese American Community Senior Service in San Jose, and is the former chair of the Aging Services Collaborative of Santa Clara County. He's a passionate advocate for digital inclusion and literacy, having helped author a white paper recently for the county on the state of digital connection for older adults. Ryan, the mic is yours.
Thank you so much, Sophie. I'm delighted to be here. And this topic is very important to me because in my observations of our participants at Senior Planet at Avenidas, where we empower older adults to use technology, we have received a lot of questions about misinformation and how to be proactive in combating misinformation. So I'm delighted to be joined today by two remarkable catalysts of change working towards empowering consumers to better understand the online platform so we can manage it rather than it managing and controlling us. But before introducing our speakers and to give our speakers today a sense of what has brought you to today's program, if we could please take a quick poll. It should pop up on your screen. And I'll just read out the questions right now. I'd like to know more about, and please check all that apply. What resources exist to help me fact check? How to make sure I'm not spreading misinformation? What resources exist to help teach others to be safe media consumers? Or if there's any other reason, please feel free to put it in the chat. And I'll give a couple more seconds. And just thank you so much, everyone, for your participation in the poll. Great. And so if you can see, 89%, about 16 of our 18 participants are interested in what resources exist to help me fact check. 44% are interested in how to make sure I'm not spreading information, and 78% are interested in what resources exist to help teach others to be safe media consumers. So thanks again so much for participating in that poll. It helps our speakers and myself today understand why you logged in. So our first speaker is Pam Brunskill, who is a senior manager of education design at the News Literacy Project. She joined the News Literacy Project after 20 years of experience in education and publishing. She taught elementary and middle school students, as well as fellow teachers as an adjunct education instructor at schools and colleges in New York and Pennsylvania. As a literacy specialist and consultant, She worked to align and enhance kindergarten through 8th grade writing programs in Western New York. She also founded and operated Authors and Educators, a company dedicated to developing curriculum resources for publishers and authors. She also co-authored a book on information literacy. She holds a bachelor's degree in elementary education from SUNY College at Buffalo and a master's degree in education from the University at Buffalo. Pamela joins us today from New York, and welcome, Pam. And secondly, our second speaker is joining us from Montana, and her name is Rosemary Smith. She's the managing director at the Better Together Foundation and impact producer of the award-winning documentary, Trust Me. Rosemary is a media literacy expert and believes that media literacy may be the most important topic of our time. Prior to joining the Get Better Foundation, Rosemary was vice president and national sales manager for Eagle Radio Group, headquartered in Northern Michigan. She and her husband, Kent, built their media group from the ground up. They were named the voice of Northern Michigan for their award-winning morning shows in each of the markets they served. As impact producer of the film Trust Me, Rosemary helped cement the foundation's diverse world-class advisory board of scientists, psychologists, neuroeconomists, journalists, and media literacy specialists. Rosemary is a Montana chapter leader for Media Literacy Now and is working with legislators to help bring media literacy support to schools nationwide. And welcome, Rosemary. So again, as I said before, I'm so delighted to have you both here today and to learn more about your work. You both have worked to raise awareness about the consequences of misinformation being spread, but also the importance of educating ourselves, our young people, and all users of media to be critical thinkers and consumers. So if we could start, Rosemary, if you could tell us more about your film, how it came about, and what it seeks to accomplish.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, Trust Me brings awareness of people's need for media literacy to build trust, resilience, well-being, preservation of democracy, and support of credible journalism. The film is being broadcast throughout the world with support from the U.S. State Department. It's being broadcast at embassies and American corners globally, as well as on PBS and World Channel this year through December, and then is available for streaming at trustmedocumentary.com. It's also licensed for schools and university use, along with some curriculum written by News Literacy Project and our partner, Pam Brunskill, who you see on this webinar. The film came about was actually the vision of our Getting Better Foundation's CEO, Joe Phelps, and he's the executive producer of the film because he is an optimist and thought, wow, it's a great time to be alive, isn't it? Poverty and famine are being reduced. Life expectancy is increasing. Things are just getting better all the time. Why is there such doom and gloom and people so depressed and anxious and suicidal? And so he and the original managing director of the Getting Better Foundation, Hank Shaw, put together an advisory board of big thinkers like Steven Pinker from Harvard and Paul Zak from Claremont University. Michael Shermer is an editor, and Martha Groves from the LA Times. And they kind of came to a conclusion that people's inability to consume this vast amount of media since the advent of the internet, because there's always been negativity and bias in the news, right? Ever since the printing press, and then radio and television, and every new media seems to create these dilemmas on how do we consume this responsibly. So the advisory board suggested that media literacy might be a solution. So when I came on board, we cemented that advisory board. We've now grown it to be about a dozen different professionals and experts. And they said, this is great. You guys support media literacy education in schools. Kids are going to get this in their curriculum eventually because of legislative efforts, and teachers like Pam who are embracing this initiative to help empower our students. But what are you doing for that generation, your generation, Rosemary, those 55-year-olds and up, that they're not going to go back to school. They're not going to get media literacy. What about a documentary film? So that was the impetus behind producing Trust Me. I will say one more thing before I turn it back over to you, Ryan, is that we hired Oscar-nominated director Rocco Bellic from Hollywood, who put together an amazing team. Michael Falavalita, who's the editor of the film, he worked on Jurassic Park, Batman films, and Rocco directed and produced Happy, which was a Netflix darling for weeks and weeks. And he also worked with Tom Shadyac on the Bruce Almighty and Evan Almighty films. So he's an optimist himself.
Great. Thanks so much for sharing, Rosemary. And I just have to say personally, it's such a powerful film. And for me, really hit home how misinformation has real consequences and continues to dramatically impact our society daily. On that note, how has the audience responded to the film?
Oh, so we finished filming February of 2020. And then the pandemic happened. So there was no big theatrical release like you see the Hollywood films having big cinemas. And that was a little discouraging at first, but it allowed us to focus on the educational market and to work with the US State Department on these embassy screenings. And the response has been amazing. One of the best testimonials, I think, for the film was a group of journalism students who watched it in Europe, in Greece. And after the film, they said they had tears in their eyes, and they said to me, we thought, who falls for this stuff? Are they dummies or something like that? Or who falls for fake news? And if they do, what's the big deal? Or who gets bullied? Big deal. They'll, have some therapy later on in life. This is what they said to me. And they had 4 years of undergraduate school and 3 years of journalism. They had a lot of media literacy education. And then they said, but until we saw the film, and those real stories where mis and disinformation had repercussions, life and death, a young man, a beautiful young man from India who was killed, who was lynched today, in this day and age, was lynched because of misinformation online. A family who nearly lost their young son because of misinformation, anti-vax misinformation they found online. So until we saw those real stories and empathize with these families, do we realize that we might be in the most important profession that we could be in today?
Wow, thank you so much for sharing, Rosemary.
Welcome.
And Pam, if you could tell us about the work of News Literacy Project, what does it seek to do and how?
Absolutely. And I'll just reiterate, the Trust Me documentary is fantastic. You absolutely should see it. The News Literacy Project, we are a nonpartisan education nonprofit dedicated to equipping individuals with the tools to determine when information is credible or not. And then hopefully individuals will use that knowledge to act on it, building a movement for news literacy across the country. All of our resources and programs are free, completely free. We are funded by grants and donations, and you can find us online at newslit.org. I can put that in the chat for you. And we also have a new online learning platform called Rumor Guard. If we want to show the website real quick, just so people know what I'm talking about. Yeah, so newslit.org takes us to the News Literacy Project. And we have two arms to our organization. One is an education arm, K-12, and then the other one is for the general public, for everyone. So if you go to our website, you'll click on the For Everyone. So let's click on it. And you can see we have a ton of resources to help individuals grow their news literacy skills and competencies. Get Smart About News is our newsletter. Checkology is a learning platform. Informable is an app where you can take quizzes and games about news literacy. We've got a podcast. So lots and lots of different resources for growing your news literacy capabilities. Rumor Guard is our newest platform. if we want to click on that. And it's a curated collection of viral misinformation with summaries of fact checks. They concisely explain why something isn't true, and give news literacy takeaways and insights to help people recognize and debunk misinformation on their own. There clearly are several fact-checking organizations out in the world, Snopes, PolitiFact, and even RumorGuard. What is unique about RumorGuard, though, is the intent is to teach individuals how to identify patterns of these rumors that go viral, to be on the lookout before they hit you. So we're trying to train people essentially to be fact checkers, and that's pretty neat. And then another one that's super popular, people really like our quizzes. So if you want to click on tips and quizzes, and then at the top, don't scroll too far, you can zero in on, just click on quizzes. You see that tab, and that will, right there. And that makes sure that only our quizzes pop up, and you can take a quiz and test your knowledge on, should you share it, or I can't read them. I'm not 15 anymore. But the First Amendment and all that, right? We have quizzes you can test your knowledge, and it will give you feedback as to why an answer is right or wrong. So that's a very, very quick overview, and we can get into more of what we have, but that's just an introduction to the News Literacy Project.
Great. Thanks so much, Pam. I have to say, what I appreciate about not only the News Literacy Project, but the website is just the substance and also the hope that you're disseminating by being a resource that we can all go to empower ourselves to be news literate. So, as we just discussed, Rosemary mentioned, especially shown in your film, I think we can all agree that consequences of misinformation can be very damaging and even life-threatening. But the spreading of misinformation has been around even before the internet. So to both of our speakers, what makes social media or the online platform different?
Right, I'll jump in. So you are totally right, Ryan. Media, the format of media is what makes the spread of misinformation different, and the speed. When the advent of the printing press, there certainly were lies. There certainly was politicizing. There was polarizing. But the speed of the newspaper, think of how long it took to deliver the newspaper by Pony Express, right? And then by mail, and then by home delivery. And then radio changed the speed of the message, because now you can turn on a button and hear it. And then television, again, amped up the speed of the message. Now with the advent of the internet, it's really the speed of the message, and it's the speed at which we can share. So think of how long it takes a journalist, a credible journalist, like in our film, we highlight Jeffrey Gettleman, who's a New York Times Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. And he explains what he does to vet a story. He interviews those involved, and he gets not just two sides of the story. We used to, in the radio business, we follow the fairness doctrine long after it was disintegrated, but we wanted to cover both sides of the story. Well, a credible journalist recognizes that there's more than one side of a story. There's more than two sides. So they'll cover all aspects and try to get all of the opinions, and then write the story without a bias. They'll take it to their editor, who might take a day or two to get back to them and say, why did you position it this way? Did you consider this? Now he might have to go back to the source and re-interview them and try to ferret out all of the facts, and then publish it, right? Well, now, because of the advent of cell phones and media, we can share messages very quickly, and even credible journalists are hungry to get their stories out quickly, because there's so many different journalists. So the speed is what really makes it different. And when you think about that, it takes a lot longer to ferret out facts. Look at COVID. It took so long to ferret out, what is it? How are we going to treat it? how fast is it spreading? Is it really a threat? Is it just another, Ebola that only a few people have contracted? Or is it going to be a global epidemic? So all of these facts take time to ferret out. And with the speed of the internet, it makes it very difficult to have credible facts in your hands, whether, malign influencers or not, just not knowing.
Wow, thanks, Rosemary. And yeah, speed makes complete sense. And on that note, we got a quick question in the chat just mentioning the Trust Me documentary and how to access it. And I just wanted to mention that the movie is available potentially at your local library, and it's also streamable on the Canopy app, which is the public library movie stream. I didn't know if you wanted to add anything to that too as well. And I see we have the Rosemary added the links. But Rosemary, anything to add before I ask Pam the same question?
Yeah, so I put both of the links for Trust Me documentary and our Getting Better Foundation in the chat, but the film is available for streaming online for that $6.50 for like home watch parties type thing. If you wanted to provide a scholarship to your children or your grandchildren's schools, that Trust Me documentary will also provide a link to New Day Films or Canopy for educational licensing as well.
Great. Thanks so much, Rosemary. And
Thank you.
Pam, so same question to you about what makes social media different, especially in this day and age.
I can piggyback off Rosemary for sure. The speed at which information travels is much faster. We've also inherited the most complex information environment in history, because now it's not just the newspaper, it's not just the radio, it's not just TV coming at you, at set times. Those gatekeepers are still around at our San Jose-based newspapers, but social media has opened it up so that anyone can publish anything. And that's both a positive and a negative, right? Because we're hearing from voices that have been silenced in the past or underrepresented. So in that sense, social media is wonderful, and we're hearing all sorts of stories. On the other hand, we're getting lots of garbage and lots of people, some bad actors, some people acting with the best of intentions and spreading misinformation. And not enough people are news literate in understanding what makes a quality source, what makes evidence credible, right? Because you and I, we didn't grow up in this environment. We didn't have news literacy in our education system. So we are accustomed to, if a article comes our way, just thinking that it was vetted. And throughout most of history, and of course there was misinformation, as Rosemary mentioned, back in ancient times, and in the revolutionary times, there are examples, but the extent is much more pronounced nowadays. So we need to just make sure that we are learning, what does a standards-based news organization involve? And how is that different from Joe Schmo, posting a blog post? Because a lot of people, I don't want to say they can't tell the difference, but in terms of credible evidence, we are finding that not everyone can identify when information is credible or not.
Great, thanks, Pam. And there have been a number of articles written recently, for example, in Wired Magazine, Scientific American, and others, where it's been reported that research shows that youth, especially at the middle school and high school age, are very susceptible to media influences and can benefit from some guidance. So I have 3 questions. How have you found this to be true? And what do you think can be done about it? And how can parents or grandparents address this? And maybe Rosemary, I'll call on you. Or...
Sure. Well, I've seen this in our own children. We raised four children, 3 boys and 1 daughter. And they all struggled, with the advent of the mobile devices, and maybe we gave them to them too soon. And part of what's so great, this partnership with News Literacy Project, is Pam had written a curriculum, not just for K-12 and collegiate schools, but also for parents and grandparents, like with value statements. When's a good time to give your child or grandchild a cellular phone? And what are some guidelines that you can put in place to protect them and yet keep the peace at home, right? Because one of the worst things we can do to a child is to take away their phone. Oh my goodness, that is, but we saw, especially our sons, and our oldest son struggled with suicide and depression and anxiety. And looking back now, we attribute a lot of that to the fact that he was overwhelmed with the amount of information at his fingertips and the amount of, I would say, bullying that he did and that some of his friends did in high school. We were fortunate. We ran into a very good psychologist who told us this is temporary. Once we give him the tools to navigate this very complicated world, his brain is just now forming, and it won't be fully formed until he's probably 30 years old. So with the right amount of cognitive behavior therapy, which is media literacy for the masses, he might need some medication, which he did for a short period of time, but knowing that that's temporary, and that by providing these tools and resources, that adolescents are able to overcome and learn these tools. It seems so daunting, at first, but the more we expose ourselves to resources like Newslit Project and the Rumor Guard and the quizzes, it becomes ingrained just like anything else. And we're not too old. We're not old dogs. We can learn new tricks, but new tricks that are empowering to us, right? So I think that's the main important thing to know, is that it's temporary, that providing the tools and the resources to our students, it will help them navigate this complicated world and be able to rise above.
Well, thank you so much for sharing such a personal story related to your family. And Pam, similar question to you. What can be done? Have you found that youth are susceptible? What can parents and grandparents do to address this?
Yeah, youth definitely are susceptible to influences on social media. I've seen it in my own kids, and there's a ton of research. I think Wall Street Journal had a whole thing on the Facebook files that talked about the influences teens encounter and this past year. In 2019, also, Stanford History Education Group, SHEG for short, did a follow-up on a very influential study from 2016, where they found 2/3 of the students couldn't tell a difference between news stories and ads. And those ads would be set off by the words sponsored content. And that was on Slate's homepage. 96% of these teenagers did not consider why ties between a climate change website and the fossil fuel industry might lessen that website's credibility. So we know that even though students today are digital natives, that they still need to be taught how to engage and navigate our technology. And we think the way forward and how to do this is obviously from the News Literacy Project, I'm going to say news literacy education and doing things like pre-bunking, which is what we're doing with Rumor Guard. And pre-bunking is a practical application of inoculation theory, which is exactly as it sounds. If you think about inoculation and vaccines, right, you get a small dose before the massive negative hits. So pre-bunking with rumors would give you a shot of what is the misinformation you may encounter in the world. Is it going to be imposter content where somebody's pretending to be somebody they're not? Like a lot of times you'll see online a quote attributed to a famous person. Or is it going to be words on a t-shirt from a celebrity that weren't actually on that t-shirt, right? So that's a little bit of pre-bunking where you can be exposed to something that may come at you later to try to manipulate your thoughts about this person, about this topic. And that's going to allow you to engage with social media in a little more critical way. We at the News Literacy Project say we want to engage with thinking like journalists. And if we know how journalists think and what a good, credible piece of news, a news article would entail, both from start story idea to what gets published and how, then we are able to evaluate the pieces of news and information that come our way. And then how can parents, grandparents address this? Well, it's easy to say, on the screen, talk to your kids, talk to your grandkids, ask them what they're seeing. I have 3 kids. And when I ask them, what are you seeing online? Nothing, right? So you can say, hey, I heard there was this new TikTok trend. What is it? And have them explain it to you. And if they're in a good mood, they might. And if they're not, you can say, is this true? And just ask, because our kids, at least my kids on TikTok, know a whole lot more about that platform than I do.
Yeah, thanks so much, Pam. And on this topic of students and that they have access to a curriculum, that they're a captive audience, especially with news literacy programs. What about other age brackets that may not have access to information or curriculum or materials that combat misinformation?
That's one of the reasons behind the impetus behind the production of Trust Me, was to bring cognitive behavior therapy and media literacy to the masses in 1 hour or 1.5 hours. If you watch the long version, you can gain an awareness of not only the importance of media literacy, the risks and repercussions of being media illiterate. And then you might have seen another film that came out about the same time from one of our stars of our film, Tristan Harris, who is a Google ethicist who spoke out about the industry and how the platforms knowingly knew that these platforms were manipulative. And that they try to lure you, because all media has a reason, right? An agenda. And it's mostly money motivated, to keep you on their platform longer, or to get you to buy something, right? Or especially with seniors, we are finding that there's a lot of online manipulation, financially, health-wise, environmental. We're seeing a lot of mis and disinformation. So a lot of that is addressed in an hour. It brings that awareness and then provides tools to empower ourselves and others and to share. So it's a fast way to see to bring awareness, and then people can take the impetus upon themselves to delve into the lessons, to instill those empowering tools.
Right. Thanks, Rosemary. And Pam, a similar question of how can we help adults and older adults gain skills on how to navigate media safely and critically, and what resources exist to fact check?
Sure. And I can answer that, but I also see 2 questions in the chat. Do you want me to address those first or after?
Why don't we hold off on those questions, but I'll be sure
Sure.
to ask those.
Okay. So at the News Literacy Project, as I said, we have both the education arm and the general public arm. And on our, for both, we have a framework to support educators in developing units, lessons, or district-wide curriculums. For that framework, we identified 5 core competencies we believe individuals need in order to be news literate. The first one involves distinguishing news from other types of information, like, is it opinion? Is it propaganda, right? The second one is the importance of the First Amendment and a free press, thinking of it as a cornerstone of democracy, the 4th pillar. The third standard is going to be, or third competency is standards of quality journalism. The 4th is being able to detect misinformation and faulty evidence. And the 5th is having a sense of responsibility for the information they share. So educators can develop units or whatever lessons they want to fit one of these core competencies. We also have Checkology, a virtual platform that develops these concepts with subject matter experts. And we recently made Checkology available to the public because we realize that in today's confusing information landscape, everyone can benefit from these lessons no matter their age. Illinois, it was the first state to require all high school students to take media literacy classes. In New Jersey recently, I think they actually passed the legislation for K through 12 literacy instruction as well. So it's making its way.
That's another thing that parents and grandparents can do to help speed the empowerment of students and their children and grandchildren is write a letter to your legislators. It's so easy to do these days. They have a link right on their website or on your state website to email and say, look at what are you doing about media literacy education in schools to empower our children and grandchildren to give them the tools that they need to navigate this complicated world.
Great, thank you. And yeah, I'll make sure to ask both questions in our question and answer session. But one other question that's come up is, it feels like every week there's a new app, a new technology, a new term. How can someone keep up with all this newness? Do you have any advice for our audience on how to safely manage being online and safely staying current and up to date?
It can be overwhelming, right, Pam? When we started this work, it was just our foundation was organized in 2016, but we started doing this work about 4 years ago, and there were we found very few organizations doing work in this area, right? And now we attend like the United Nations Educational Conference, UNESCO, or NATO's recognizing media literacy as a strategic defense initiative. US Department of Homeland Security is recognizing media literacy as strategic defense initiatives. Because of the propaganda, we're seeing firsthand, Russia's interference in the Ukraine. We're seeing Chinese interference in all of Europe and Americas. So I think now it's mainstream and there's more organizations coming together to solve this problem. All new media creates problems. But it's such a wonderful, we can't forget that it's a wonderful mechanism. The internet is amazing. It's connecting people from all over the world and ideas and building platforms to help support science and the environment and ancestry. It's just, there's so many different facets of it that are so wonderful that we can't just say, oh, I'm not going to go online anymore. I'm not going to let my kids go online. I'm going to tell my kids not to give their kids a cell phone. That's just not realistic because it's such a powerful tool. So all media creating problems, we're smart people, we're going to solve this. And there's more and more people coming together to solve this. So it's attaining a critical mass. The fact that we're speaking today with you and your audience is an amazing thing via Zoom, right? Who thought? But so we're going to solve this problem. It's just going to take all of us coming together to recognize the risks, and then to utilize the tools like Newslit projects to help empower ourselves.
Great. And Pam, anything to add? I can also dive right into our audience questions, but.
Yeah, in terms of staying safe online, I probably have just a couple of things to add. And the first is the more emotional a post or article makes you feel, it should make you pause. That's the very first tip I would give anyone. If something gets you either very excited or gets you hopeful or love or angry, those are some of the biggest emotions that are trying to manipulate you. And sometimes the information is credible and real, but oftentimes it's not. So before you share that or act on it, you're going to want to make sure that what you're reading is accurate. And you do that not by reading in that same site, or you don't go to the about page, you read laterally. And this is from Sam Weinberg and colleagues at Stanford History Education Group. They call it lateral reading. You go to a different website to read about that source and what it has to say. And you read it from a different source about that topic. You're going to want to find credible, I would say, standards-based news organizations. If it's a real event, they will have written about it. So find what other people are saying. If it makes you question, is this real? Go to other sources. And then train yourself to again, think like a fact checker, think like a journalist. I'm going to say, start subscribing to our resources. You might want to join our rumor guard. And here, the link is in the chat. There, you're going to learn general tips where you can apply anywhere, no matter what app or social media site you're using. For example, you learn how to spot misinformation, the importance of lateral reading, which I just explained. You're consulting multiple sources by opening up a new tab. You'll learn about the 5 factors to evaluate a post. Is it authentic? Has it been posted by a credible source? Is there evidence that proves the claim? Is the context accurate? Is it based on solid evidence? And we'll go through these with a number of examples every week so that you can train yourself. And if a post fails one of the factors, it generally often fails. just in general, it's not like you have to, the more factors it fails, the less credible it is. If it fails one, it fails them all. So again, just start training yourself to learn what is real and what is not.
Great advice, Pam. Thank you so much. And yeah, thanks, Rosemary. And I'm now going to go to some of the questions that we've received in the chat. We've actually received 4 so far, and I'll try to go in order. And then just wanted to let our audience know that we'd also like to show a clip of experts from the Trust Me documentary, which might prompt some further questions. But jumping right into the first question, I am concerned about social engineering using Disney, in quotes, Disney surveys to mine for personal information. For example, the survey asks questions like, what Disney movie premiered when you were born? Which Disney character princess was your favorite when you were 10 years old? This event attendee mentions my adult daughter with intellectual disabilities has these surveys forwarded to her by her friends, so she trusts the survey. I'm worried the information is being used to build a profile about her for potential scams. Am I being paranoid?
We have to be a little paranoid when it comes to our, I think there's slight risk to being paranoid, and there's more risk to sharing more about ourselves online. But if, coming from my kids who are now all in their 20s and 30s, they told me a long time ago, Mom, there's no privacy. Because I was saying, watch what you're saying online, your privacy, oh, your privacy, right? And they're like, what privacy? Since the advent of the internet, there's no privacy anymore. You guys subscribe to ancestry.com. What are you talking about? You put your, so it's a matter of how comfortable we are with people knowing ourselves. And there are some bad actors out there. So we do have to protect ourselves a little bit about what we say online. And, I think we can safely assume that the more media literate we become, the more we can see those as manipulative ways to utilize our information to earn money. And it's not paying us the money, it's paying a corporation who provides a service to us, which is a wonderful service, but they are using our private information and we're giving it to them. So we have to be cognizant of that.
Thanks, Rosemary. And a second question that we received, and this goes back to a previous conversation about fact checking. How can we encourage others to check their facts without making them defensive? I'm particularly thinking of friends or family who feel, in quotes, the other side, mostly politically bipartisan, are to blame, when the reality is all sides are using misinformation as a tactic.
I'm going to let Pam answer that. Sorry, Pam.
No, it's all good. And I almost wish my colleague John Silver were here, because he leads a webinar about Thanksgiving and having Thanksgiving dinner with your relatives and dealing with this exact question.
That's a really good one to watch, by the way. I love that one.
So he uses an acronym called PEP, where he says use patience, empathy, and persistence, right? If you are talking with a loved one or someone you care about who thinks very differently from you, or believes mis or disinformation, you're not going to change their mind right away, right? The more someone believes something, the harder it is to change a mind and get them to even admit to needing to fact check. So it starts with, well, how do you know that? Can you explain that to me? Right? And then oftentimes they will, I won't say often, sometimes they will recognize they don't have evidence to back them up. Sorry, I just got a notification on the computer. So you start small, you engage them in conversation, get them to tell you why they think they are thinking that. And then you can try to push back, right? And say, well, what about this? And well, how come this doesn't work then, right? And you start poking little holes, but not pointing out that they're wrong, right? It's so important to, I want to say, save face, right? That because you love these people, right? They're your family, and you get into a conversation, it might get heated, you back off, everyone cools down, you try again, right? Because that's how we're going to try to come back as a organization. Yeah, patience, empathy, persistence, PEP. Because otherwise we just become even more spread apart, and we don't want to do that.
Great, thanks, ma'am.
Empathy too in them, by asking them to share how this subject has affected them personally. Because if they share a story of their own experience, they might even recognize, oh, wait, that's not really what I think. But you can't tell them that, they have to come to that conclusion themselves. So if they say, oh, wait a minute, maybe I don't agree with that. That's very powerful. That's the lights go on, and it might be the next time you speak, or it might be a year from now.
Yeah, and it takes a long time for in certain instances. You can't immediately say go to Snopes. You can't immediately say go to, because that's, the facts don't matter. if for some people, right? If it's an identity thing, if it's a emotional part of them, that's not what's going to change their minds.
Really helpful advice. And I'm sure we just had Thanksgiving where we're seeing a lot of family members, but I know that the holidays are coming up as well. So I know that our audience probably very appreciates this information. On that note, Tiffany, if maybe we could show the video clip, which might prompt some further questions. And I know that I just wanted to do a time check. If we have about 10 more minutes of the event, and we'll go from there. Thanks.
Our perceptual system is attuned to confirmation bias. We face the world looking to confirm what we already believe. And that is not something new that occurred with the advent of the internet. I think it was first revealed when Cain killed Abel.
Critical media literacy is considered a tool, a potential tool for transformative learning. It has the ability to allow oppressed populations and oppressed students to see the world from a different lens. So there's this quote by Freire that says, children see the world before they see the word, right? And so what critical media literacy does, it allows them to dissect and understand how to read the world that they've already been exposed to. Media literacy empowers them to take action too in creating media and making space. I consider media literacy a counter space. It's a counter space. When you think of counter spaces, you think of hip hop was considered a counter space. It's a space for oppressed populations to express themselves, to be themselves, to create their own narratives. It's a space for healing. And so critical media literacy creates a counter space for marginalized and oppressed and urban youth.
There is a huge disconnect between the state of the world and what people know. The fact that we have lived through 50 years of shrinking poverty, shrinking child mortality, declining illness on all sorts of levels, increasing a lifespan, an extraordinary period. Nobody has ever lived through a half century with the sort of improvements in human living standards that we've seen, and yet most people think the world is going wrong. It's sort of inevitable and obvious that the media will focus on bad news, but it does have a systemic effect that is very dangerous, which is that it gives people too much of an impression that things are going wrong, and it therefore makes them helpless and fatalistic about the future in particular. And I think that's a real problem, that the relentless focus on bad news makes people assume that there's nothing you can do to improve the world.
The time that human beings spend on the internet is time that is being bought by advertisers and by companies who want to sell advertising. And that's the model of the internet. The internet is advertising, and advertising feeds the social media platforms. It feeds the search engines. The most powerful places on the internet are, run by ad sales.
So from a neuroscience perspective, we know that when you have high levels of stress or anxiety or fear, that reduces the neurologic substrates to allow us to trust others, including others who are giving us information, and that brings us into our shell. So now we begin to narrow our communities, we have less information coming in, and it also degrades our quality of life. Now we are less connected to other people because we're in a smaller bubble. So living in a fear-based world is very dangerous to your physical health, your mental health, and your happiness, because you're struggling to make those connections that evolution and our brains want us to have.
Great. Thank you, Tiffany, for showing those clips. And, just a quick time check. We have a couple minutes left. And so, Pam, if you don't mind, if we might be able to multitask, and if you could put in the chat about, there's a question about, does the News Literacy Project have any volunteer opportunities, or are there toolkits available to help spread the word? And I know this will be recorded on YouTube. So if you don't mind, maybe mentioning quickly and then putting in the chat if there are any links. And I think she's looking up some links. And on that note, maybe just one last question that we received from Bill. I think it's actually an excellent question of what possible incentives could there be for news organizations to avoid false, negative, and sensational content? And I love this question because I feel like it's looking really for a solution. And so maybe Rosemary, while Pam is looking up some information, sorry, I put you on the spot, Pam.
No. The internet, while it's a wonderful thing, it's also done away with a lot of the revenue that radio, television, newspapers relied on to support credible journalists, right? To do that research and that vetting so that what we read was actually fact-based. So because those revenues have eroded, being able to support credible journalism is a crucial issue that we're facing, and we have to solve that. There are some organizations, nonprofit organizations, who are buying news outlets in order to generate grants and funding from non-typical revenue sources so that they can support these journalists. So until we solve that problem, this is going to be an issue for a while. And those credible journalists will be able to vet the stories and give us, but there's also an aspect, not just in support of credible journalism, but, journalism is not to make us feel warm and fuzzy. It's to bring awareness of issues that we're facing. It's not to bring awareness of the thousands of planes that take off and land every day safely, right? Is what Jeffrey Gettleman says in our film. His job is to write about that one plane who took off and because of a mechanical issue, killed hundreds of people. And that brings awareness that, oh, Boeing's got an issue with their new jetliners, and we need to fix that. We need to ground those airplanes until we fix that issue. So that's what credible or solutions journalism does. It's very important to our democracy, so that we know that there's a Vladimir Putin out there who has designs on invading another country. We need to know these things, but it's our responsibility to arm ourselves that it doesn't affect us negatively in our daily basis.
Great, thanks so much, Rosemary. And so on that note, I just want to thank both of our speakers so much for being here today. I hope the audience, you found value in today's session, either in learning a new way to be proactive in combating misinformation or learning a resource or resources that empower you to be more news literate. Our hope for today's session, as Sophie said, was to have all of us take a moment to think through the importance of being skeptical, but not cynical. And so on that note, I wanted to close today's session by just mentioning that, again, I'm affiliated with Older Adult Technology Services and Senior Planet, where we actually offer online programming and in-person programming across the country. All of our information for our sessions, we sometimes host over 40 sessions a week, are on seniorplanet.org. Thank you, Tiffany, for sharing the link. That's where you can find a lot more information and similar events like this one on our website. And so, to close, we encourage you to learn more about the film Trust Me and the News Literacy Project, in addition to checking out the Senior Planet website. Please know that there are resources to help you navigate the media at all 3 organizations' websites. And we want everyone to feel empowered and to be savvy media consumers. So again, thank you so much for participating in today's event. On behalf of ARP California and OATS/Senior Planet, thank you for being with us today. I also just want to thank ARP California staff, Sophie, Shay, and Tiffany, in addition to our just amazing speakers, Pam and Rosemary. Just such a pleasure to have talked to you today. I feel better informed because of both of you, and I can't thank you enough. And this closes out our event.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you
you for having us.
Happy holidays, everybody.